It's the stretched out hands, theatrical, witch-like, emblematic of the sort of smothering grasp of the protector. You know, the protector who only seems to be the protector. And I mentioned, used the word co-textual in a few slides ago. I mean, like, it's exactly what happens in The Turn of the Screw, where, like, that sort of tight grasp by the governess of little minds. You know, that's the point when he dies. She's trying to protect him as she sees it from those evil forces. Somehow the stretched out, that word osseous seems to me to make a scene. I mean, it's interesting that in the prefaces, when Henry all writers talk to themselves as they write. My taxi driver friend says it's fine to talk to yourself. Everyone does it. The important thing is to say the right things. And he's a very wise man. But Henry James, he keeps repeating in these late prefaces, dramatise, dramatise, dramatise. You know, as he's working out the stories, that's sort of like hammering in his head. Dramatise it, you've got to dramatise it. So anyway, I think that's what he's done there, and I think the word osseous helps by its sort of strangeness as applied to hands. The episode is kind of scenographic. It makes it vivid in the theatre of the mind, the fictional text. I mean, like, we have to be seeing something happening. I mean, if we're conscious just like of words scrolling, that isn't reading fiction. Like, in fiction, the words just dissolve, sort of fly away, and you're seeing images, you know, of what happens in that room, who stands up, who sits down, how they're dressed, and so on. Like, you're staging it. It's a very profound realisation, I think, that James has. Now, I have to confess that you may have read the author of Beltraffio without seeing the word osseous, because it only appears actually belatedly in the 1907 revision. And I've just put the two side by side, just so you can get an idea of, like, the kind of revision James was doing. Right through his whole work, like he was sort of adjusting phrases. You know, so I've just put in red where there's a difference. You know, so there you've got the early text, and there you've got the later text. So the boy was wandering away with his father. The boy had surrendered himself to his father. Like sometimes he seems to be trying to make the theme more explicit. Wandering away, no, surrendered himself. Sometimes you can't really tell, like, in one version it's Mark ambient, and then in the second version it's just Mark paid no attention. The eyes disappear explicitly, looked at her in shy appeal instead of shy entreaty, and so on. I mean, those two are clearly different. What's the difference between little and small? A little clear new voice, and a small. What was in his mind when he changed little to small? It's very hard to know, isn't it? And then my darling we've got here, and dearest in the other. And then you see that her long, slender hands, her long, slender hands. Henry James's punctuation becomes, I was going to say erratic, but it's sort of, you know, it becomes wobbly or something later on. So her long, slender, slightly too osseous hands. It's like a sort of, you know, they're not interrupted, it's kind of flowing. So you see all of those things together. You know, slender hands sound quite nice, but osseous hands don't. So you've got kind of like superimposed imagery. I mean, I think it would be very difficult to say, like to try and make a judgment, version A, like reading the whole of the 1884 text it's better than the 1907, I mean, that's what critics like F.R. Leavis wanted to say. But actually, notoriously, he made the mistake of using a late version to illustrate the early style, which I suppose speaks for itself. Anyway, who was Rose Sherry? This is the only other occurrence then of the word osseous, and it occurs in the autobiographical book Small Boy and Others, and he's describing a particular actress, and this is the adolescent Henry James, age 14. They were frequently taken to Europe, particularly Paris, Italy, and England. James's knowledge of the theatre, the French theatre, then, seems colossal, and it's almost exclusively in terms of great actresses. I mean, the age was defined by sort of mesmerising actresses, but the plays they were in were either old plays, French classics and things, or they were very poor plays. So actually, when you were out there on that stage, there was absolutely no safety net at all. I mean, like the effect you made just depended on your, presence and projection, and like there was no sort of brilliant text full of witty, powerful jokes and then great sort of effects of theatre. You had to do everything. I think that's what he was kind of fascinated by. It's just you. You're just standing there, and the spotlight or whatever it was is on you. But there isn't a kind of anyway. Rose Cherie then. He applies this word to his impression of her on the stage. Rosemary Simpson, I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't know the... anyway, but her stage name was Rose Cherie. And he applies this word osseous to her physique en gras, her unprepossessing physique, to her at first extremely odd and positively osseous appearance, an emaciated woman with a high bulging forehead. That's how he described it. It doesn't sound very nice, does it? I mean, like, there's no kind of... Anyway, I'll just show you the whole passage. If you want to look it up, it's chapter 26. There's no point. That's a sort of... thing. And then he always evokes the sense of time. He says, one's sense of such things after so long a time has, of course, scant authority for others. But I myself trust my vision of Rose Cherie's fine play, the way her acting, just as I trust that of her physique en gras, her, at first, extremely odd and positively osseous appearance, an emaciated woman with a high bulging forehead, for whom the triumphs of produced illusion, as in the second, third and fourth great dramas of the younger Dumas, had to be triumphs indeed. And I don't know, the second play that Dumas Fils wrote, The Lady of the Camellias, the one that was, the woman who's dying of whatever it is, tuberculosis, I think, and so which produces a kind of ethereal, sort of almost spiritualized beauty. So it was imagined. For whom the triumphs of produced illusion. And I think that's what he means by the produced illusion, is that the actor has to make the scene himself. It isn't made for you by the script. You have to project it all, and he's kind of mesmerised by that process. And this is how he continues. He remembers now in rather embarrassing detail being sort of enclosed with his brother and his mother and aunt and so on in the theatre, sort of watching like this. I squeeze again with my mother, my aunt and my brother into the stuffy baignoire, like the theatre's like hot as a bathtub. And I take to my memory, in especial, Madame de Girardin's Une femme qui déteste son mari. The play is called The Woman Who Hated Her Husband, or words to that effect. And this is the thrilling story, as I judged it, of an admirable lady who, to save her loyalist husband during the Revolution, feigns the most Jacobin opinions, represents herself as a citoyenne of citoyennes in order to keep him the more safely concealed in her house. You know, so it's in the Revolution, and they're looking for aristocrats, and he's one, and they're coming to search the house, and he's hidden behind the panelling, and she's pretending to be an out-and-out revolutionist, like at every level. Like for the viewer and what's on the stage and so on, it's full of tension. He flattens himself to almost greater peril of life behind a panel of the wainscot, which she has a secret for opening when he requires air and food, and they may, for a fearful, fleeting instant, be alone together. Like it's a scene, almost kind of, there's a sort of distorted thrill or eroticism or something, you know, in the kind of confinement and everything. So that, I mean, that's the context of the occurrence of the word osses. I mean, just looking up a little more about them. Both Rose and Anna, the two sisters, they were both actresses. And in fact, you know, they were famous for their virtue. So I think the idea is there's a sort of a kind of erotic frisson or something that they haven't experienced themselves, the passions they are enacting, or something like that. And the father, who's the manager, kind of senses that. And then actually, when Rose announced that she was engaged, I mean, her father committed suicide. He threw himself out of a window. But, you know, the reasons behind such a thing. I mean, again, you know, you, like Derrida said, you could never feel that you understood what he meant. I mean, it only makes it more odd that Anna had acted in a play, the woman who threw herself out of the window. And that's what the father did. So like there's a kind of whole texicological network which sort of kind of coheres and shimmers and so on. And then like the name Eugène Sui, like it literally means good writer, doesn't it? Like he was the person who developed what the new kind of theatrical writing, which came to be called the well-made play. And in the well-made play, suddenly it wasn't just the actor or the actress on her own who had to project everything. I mean, like you had a text that kind of supported you and diffused the effort and the tension and so on. So James sort of looks back on the period before the well-made play as a kind of heroic age of acting. And then you get echoes in Rose's life. She heroically nursed her own sick child in his fatal illness. So again, that kind of seems to echo somehow with Mrs. ambient. And again, there seems that kind of sense of virtue seems to be linked to the osseousness, and that's how it happens that James uses the same word. And then finally, the kind of the Jamesian trauma, the 5 years devoted to writing for the theatre, the notorious first night of his play. I don't know if people say Guy d'Anville, as is French, supposed to be French, or Guy d'Anville. Guy d'Anville. Yeah. Sounds different, doesn't it? Henry James was consumed with nerves on this terrible night, and although it was the first night of his own play, he couldn't bear to watch in the theatre his own play. And instead he went down the street, and Oscar Wilde's The Ideal Husband was being performed. And Oscar Wilde had learned the technique of the well-made play, like even better than Eugene Sue had made it. So, the audience were chortling and applauding and so on throughout. Henry James left the theatre as that play ended, and he kind of knew inside that his play was a catastrophe, was going to be a catastrophe. And when he got back to the St James's Theatre, the play had ended, and it was being greeted with noise. There was polite applause from people like us in the in the stalls and everything, but up there in all those tiers were people who were booing, and the actor, seeing James in the wing, sort of called him onto the stage, probably not knowing what he was doing, and then the chorus of boos rose to a crescendo, and that of course was the worst night of Henry James's life. So like there's sort of trauma and ideas of theatre, and do you see what I'm sort of trying to suggest? So that's a sort of kind of illustration of the texicological approach, or what Marina Warner calls digging down through the archaeology of the text. So I said I'd end with the ends of theory. It's sort of difficult in a way. I'm supposed to be, not supposed to be, I am doing a 4th edition of Beginning Theory. And I chatted with Matthew Frost, like the editor. We had a meal with some, and he says, just do a reflective overview of your take on theory now. So I think, God, that sounds like that sounds terrifying. A reflective overview. How could I possibly do a reflective overview? Anyway, so we worked out something a little bit less radical than a reflective overview. I think if you sat down to write a reflective overview, it wouldn't come out right. You've got to kind of realise you have written a reflective overview rather than sitting there drawing. I just wanted to try and just mention a few of the things that I've been doing with students in the last. It actually started 8 or 9 years ago, because I said some of these things. A session I did in Germany. When I look back, that was about 9 years ago. I keep saying, don't do theory, do theorising to people. Where it's not just about learning, Derrida and Barthes and Christeva and so on. Trying to work out all of that material. It's better to do it the other way. To try and think theoretically yourself, to theorise And it doesn't really matter how crude it might be. But like take a passage and just try and, how would I read it as a theorist? What would I do? What would I pick out? What would I be looking at? What would I be looking for? If I wanted to quote a bit, what bits would I mean, like you're trying to theorise yourself. So you might want to supplement or undercut or something things that theory. I mean, it doesn't matter. We have to. I mean, people say, well, isn't it the case though that you can't apply the theory till you've learned it? But I just think the metaphor of applying theory is wrong. I mean, what happens is a kind of two-way process. I mean, if someone explains a philosophical idea to me, I probably won't get it. And then they say, okay, I'll give you an example. And then that's more like an anecdote or something. And then suddenly the example starts to kind of get into those abstract words. I mean, so clearly if you just told me the example, I wouldn't be able to understand. That doesn't give me the philosophical idea. But if I've got both, you know, I can start to make something of it. Like it's about us making something of theory. I mean, it's like a poem. It isn't there until it's read, and we're responding, and you know, we're reacting, and we're remembering a bit. Like suddenly you're walking across the campus, and those couple of lines come back to you. You know, usually they come back to us slightly reorganised, which is a sign that we're kind of taking them in, as it were. So my way of, what I do, I used to think everyone means the same thing. When they say deconstruction, they all mean the same thing. But then I just started asking, what do you mean by deconstruction? And everyone says something slightly different, because everyone takes it in and sort of personalises it in a different way. So when I say don't do theory, do theory, it's sort of something like that. We've got to be more active. And then, well, don't start with the theory, start with the text. The first thing should be, that's a puzzling thing in that text. You notice that, and then you think, I wonder if there's some term in feminist theory that might, help to explain what's going on in that passage. So, like, the text should declare a problem, and then, you're looking for, it's text-led rather than theory-led. It's not like someone's sort of given you a toolkit for Christmas, and now you're keen to, to make teapot stands or something. Do you really need a teapot stand? It's better to kind of have the need and then sort of... And then that's just the third one in black there. It's just what I've said already. What happens when the unstoppable force of literary theory meets the immovable object of the literary text? And the answer is you never know. Different things happen every time. And the theorist isn't always right. And we have to, as I say, to write back to the theorists. Remember that book, great title, The Empire Writes Back, that sort of pioneering post-colonial book, like we've been depicted in all these European novels. Now it's time to write back, we depict ourselves. So we have to write back to the theorists, keep asking them, what do you mean by rigorously or whatever. And I think it's at that level you can get kind of purchase, and you start to think, now I'm kind of doing something, and I've got my own questions to ask. So right back, move from theory 1 to theory 2. Yeah, this was the idea. I never know how people talked about Web 1, but they didn't say 1, did they? It was 1.0. I can never remember.
1.0. 1.0.
1.0. Yeah, there was. so what was it called? Web 1.0, am I right?
I think so, I don't know.
Yeah, and that was when, like, you know, all the stuff was there online, and you could download it. But you were totally passive, you couldn't upload anything. And that's what theory was like in the 80s and 90s, you know, like, because we sort of when I say we, I mean my generation, you know, as people in the humanities, and we said, look, we can't do theory. You know, we're empiricists, we're liberal humanists, very sad. We've got to bring in these, you know, they're philosophers, they're linguists, they're political theorists, so we need them to do the theory. So we self-colonised. And we kind of, all we can do, we thought, we can apply the theories that they've fashioned for us, but that's all we're capable of. It's like it's constantly sort of download, you know, the French, you know, they do theory, or the Romanians, and you know, like all the people who are like, you know, so-called French theory is often by people from Romania, or you know, different parts of Africa and so on. So, I mean, that's what I realised. I started saying, look, it's okay, we'll do the theorising ourselves. It doesn't matter if it's not like 100% pure top theory, but we have to do it ourselves. It's a discipline that, you know, we are involved in. Of course we go to, you know, take things and borrow things and use them and adapt them, but that's different from just handing over the theory role. And then we try to avoid in red a Marxist reading of Look Back in Anger or something, you know. Well, you know, I don't, you know what it's going to, you know its conclusions. I just have to name it. A Marxist reading of Look Back in Anger, you know what's in it, or a feminist reading for that matter. It's just kind of pointless in a way. So again, we could profitably take an exchange of dialogue in Look Back in Anger, and you know, we could find a sort of passage that would enlighten that particular, and then we juxtapose them. So it's this example, this is the texicology thing, downscaling the encounters of text and theory, and like looking to be at the sort of text-specific level. But it's different from close reading, because some of the relevant words are not in the text we're studying, or they're echoing with things. And that's the process, I think, of making a scene in theory studies. Anyway, I'm not sure how long I've gone on for, but you've been very patient, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. A very enriching paper, which I'm sure speaks to a lot of our concerns and our students' concerns and both of it. We've got a little time for some questions, so anyone would like to throw out some questions? I know I have a few, but I'll go first. Who wants to start us off? Michael.
Terry Eagleton seems to have gone back to not what he calls close reading, but slow reading these days. But it seems to me it's more sort of dealing with the laws and the rules and being aware of how you're being manipulated by the text. And how would that fit in with?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of slow reading is great. I mean, I can remember, you know, when I was involved in teacher training, and the term slow reader was a very negative one, wasn't it? You know, it meant all sorts of things. But actually, well, what better reader could there be than a slow reader? You know, isn't that the big thing? Yeah, I think Terry Eagleton's shifts. I mean, he never kind of self-identifies the shift, but you know, he's a very, very powerful and self-reflective writer. and he never goes back, he always goes forward. And of course, I mean, what I can remember reading as a student and, young lecturer, was much more abstract than anything he seems to write now. So, I think the slow reader idea is great. And also the way it doesn't specify. I mean, it doesn't say explicitly that it has to all be on the page. Whereas remember the poet Tom Paulin has a book called The Secret Life of Poems, which I rather hate actually. I mean, it seems to, that's where the text becomes sort of toxic, so he imagines that if you get a G sound repeated, it has a meaning or something, which I've just never been able to believe, actually, which goes back to the enactment fallacy thing. But of course, he's a very good poet, although my feeling is he was a better poet quite a long time ago than he is now. I mean, I did read a marvellous poem of his a couple of years ago and bought the book. But actually, that was the one marvellous poem in the book. But on the other hand, if you've written one marvellous poem, that's okay, isn't it? That's good.
I was going to ask something about I like this notion of, the idea or the ideas encompassed by texicology. And I like the connection to toxicology as well, which is great. Because we've all been there where we sort of, I'm sick of text and dissecting texts, and you want to sort of start sewing or something, so you're not with words. Which is what I do. But the thing, it actually reminds me of texticology and the sort of the outline of the kind of, let's say, the methodology of texicology, if I can put it that way, or the practice, the activity.
Yes.
It reminds me actually, I was troubling over how one would create, let's say, article/book using the texicological method. Because it reminded me, the method perhaps, it might be naive, but the method reminded me of sort of Barthes SZ, that kind of technique of, I don't know if anyone knows, but Barthes dissects a Balzac story. And sort of basically it does it in sort of little vignettes of interpretation, which spin out in little directions and then close in on themselves and then move on to another. And he tries to create a kind of structure of this text, but it sort of ripples together. And the other thing it reminded me of was the Benjamin Walter Benjamin Arcades project, where you have these fragments. And the thing you notice about both of those books is that it finds it difficult to locate argument there, unless you say the argument is formal and sort of the dialectical interactions of the different fragments create the argument itself, or the kind of juxtaposition. But then you're getting into sort of Poundian world of moments of illumination. But I suppose what I'm saying is that almost practically, I was trying to imagine a book that used the texicological method and what it would literally look like, and where the argument would be. Would there, it was just an open question, I suppose, because it sort of troubled me. I was sort of thinking, I know it is counter to the spirit of it, but how would one become a texicologist and write the quintessential texicological argument?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question. I mean, I think the Roland Barthes book, Essay, that's about a single story of Balzac. I mean, the difference between that and what I'm calling texicology is that Roland Barthes comments on every sentence in it. I mean, it's just totally comprehensive. I mean, I can't imagine what reading that corresponds to. I mean, say, when did I last read Middlemarch? I mean, I forgot.
Last week, wasn't it?
Last week, very cool. But, if after you've read a novel, if you think a novel I read last year, what's in my mind now? What do I remember of that? And you know, actually, there's a sort of falling away of things, and like there may be an image, there may be a moment, there may be words, there may be. I mean, I can remember a couple of sentences, as everyone can, in Middlemarch, and a couple of images. And then there's something you can't quite picture. It's sort of vague. It's the mood or atmosphere or something. You know, that sort of terrible sadness of the wasted Dorothea, you know, and so on. But it's nothing like every line. I mean, if you're cumulatively, like, if you could remember it all, you couldn't remember that any of it. You wouldn't be. That wouldn't be the experience of reading the novel. I suppose that's what I think about. I mean, it's interesting. The other equivalent thing with poetry was the who is it? The essay about Baudelaire's poem Les Chats.
Oh, it's by Raffaello and Jacobson.
Jacobson, isn't it? Yeah. And like he comments on, it's only a short poem, but every single line, every single vowel, and so on. I mean, it's only about 8 or 9 pages, but personally, I just feel I'm going crazy. That isn't the way to read poetry. It's how not to read poetry, but not to read poetry. You know, you have to let it flow, and some things stand out and some don't. And like, usually the writer's trying to make that effect, because James talks a lot about the effect, you know. And then his idea is, in the short stories, if you keep shrinking it, the effect increases. What does he say? That's his definition of a short story. I think the union of whatever fullness with whatever clearness. That's his definition. A short story is the union of whatever fullness is possible, presumably, with whatever clearness is possible. So it's a short story, so you can't be full, but you have to be as full as possible. And then, you know, you can't have perfect clarity, as Derrida said. You can't get to something which can rigorously be called a perception, like a kind of decision about, you know, this, like as if you were an analyst, you know, the problem here is this neurosis with this Latin name. So, I mean, again, that isn't sort of that isn't what we read fiction for, but it's a very interesting challenge, though, to write. I think you'd have to call it texicology, and then maybe if we invited, you know, a lot of people to try the method or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, I was imagining actually a sort of dialogic book, you know, a book of dialogue, you know, about pursuing different contexts, and that would be quite a beautiful exercise actually, more of a collaborative exercise with a group of scholars that were thinking about different contexts and how they resonated.
Yeah.
It's almost like a symposium technique, or a symposium of ideas.
Yes.
It actually reminds me of Jerome McGann's type of sort of scholarship on Swinburne in the 70s, you know, when he started doing those experimental ways of viewing the poem and sort of putting himself into
that's interesting.
Yeah, there's a great book, Swinburne and An Experiment in Criticism from the 1970s, where he does this kind of quite interesting stuff.
That's interesting.
I wonder how this would work with Lydia Davis' short story, her little one-sentence stories.
Yes. Yeah, that would be very interesting too. Yes, that sort of minimalist, or those, what are they called? 55, the words, stories with 55 words. Hemingway said he could tell a story in, was it 7? 6. And he did.
Baby shoes never worn for sale.
Yeah.
For sale,
Yeah,
baby shoes never worn.
Yeah, that's right,
I mean, Ezra Pound used to say all the time, you don't need to read all of the story. Like Madame Bovary, if you have that scene where her tongue goes down into the bottom of the glass to get that last drop, He says you don't need to read the rest of the book. You don't. And quite obviously you don't need to read the whole poem. You don't need to read the whole book.
Yeah, that is interesting, yes. How much do you have to read? You know, say something like Tennyson's Hymns of the King or something. How much of it do you have to read to get the effect? Or Paradise Lost? Are you doing
I looked at my thesis.
Right.
Yeah, not all of it.
Right, yes. I mean, like as you know, Johnson saying about Milton's Paradise Lost, no one ever wished it longer. It seems to me a lot of people could have managed if it were a bit shorter. Yeah.
I have a question. It seems like what you're saying is you're talking about a move away from reductive reading. But the bit on there that says instead stage downscale in the house of text and theory seems to jar with that. So can you just expand on that?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Thanks. I think it's a bit like that class I described, where the class is sort of moving towards saying the single word which embodies everything the novel is saying. And, you know, the sense that the process kind of, that seems to be a narrowing down, can suddenly become a opening out. I mean, it's a bit like, you know, the kind, what was it called? The School of History, where you just take one provincial village in France, you know, and you do an exhaustive history of it, and you weren't thinking about, you know, the political system or the kings and queens and the position in Europe or anything like. You were just sort of going down, the annals schools, that somehow you can get to the truth in different ways. Like one way is minimalist, and the other way is, well, I suppose, like maximalist. You know, like if we reading War and Peace, you know, do we feel we're being told everything, or just everything we knew already, or what exactly? You know, like do you see what I mean? I mean, it's the business of. It's this. I often quote this thing Gerard Manley Hopkins said, where he says, whatever you look at closely seems to look closely at you. So you're kind of scrutinising it minutely, and then it suddenly seems to be doing the same to you, or something. But I suppose it's that. I mean, it's aiming for. You know, less is more. Like that slogan of contemporary architecture. Who said less is more? German architect, famous German.
Isn't it Zen? It's a Zen problem, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a Zen principle as well, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. But less is more was like the principle, like take away the decoration, you've got something less, but you've got more. So it's kind of like a sort of, I don't know, trying to pass through a barrier anyway. Sorry, I haven't really clarified that. Who was that? There's a philosopher who was famous for leaving every question more obscure than it was when he started talking about it. Maybe he was a great philosopher. Deleuze does that.
Take advantage of Professor Barry as he's here.
Yeah.
Can I argue though that sometimes the less is more doesn't really work? Like, I read a journal article last week or the week before on the wife of Bath, and they focused on her description, like they scaled it down, and they focused on one word, which was footmantle, and they went on for about 20 pages, and it just didn't seem to go anywhere.
Right.
It's a good word.
Yeah. Didn't have so many meanings.
I mean, it's you know, obviously what you're saying is true. I mean, like there's no guarantee it will work. It won't work every time, and sometimes sometimes I've started, the sort of process I've been describing, and then you suddenly think, well, actually this isn't going anywhere, it's just going round in a circle now. So you would kind of abandon it. I mean, who was the poet who said to me, this is a poet who's well into his 80s. He'd done a lecture last year it was, and then he said the thing is the poetry is just inexhaustible, isn't it? In other words, you can't, that's what a poem is, it's when you can't get to the essence of it. But sometimes, yes, you can feel, well, it's just circling there. I had a period of asking poets, how do you know when a poem is finished? Sort of, and one of them said something like that, that you realise, you're just, like today you add a word, and tomorrow you take it out again. You're just tinkering. The poem is over, really. You can put it to bed.
In the theme of poetry, what's your favourite poem and why?
My favourite
200 words to discuss.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not. I can't remember the name. There's a poem about crossing a bridge and in the country in the summer, and the poet whose name I've forgotten simply tells you what isn't there, which sounds crazy, but it's a fantastic poem, and you see very vividly what isn't there. I suppose it's a fairly standard poetic exercise where you describe things which aren't there, or it's like the sort of play that plays where the central character never appears. Like, for instance, Arnold Wesker's play, what's the Roots? Anyway, the central character that she goes on and on about, who's going to come, he doesn't in the end. He's the main character in the play, but he isn't on the stage. So I suppose in a way it's a kind of, you could say, when I describe it formulaically, it sounds like just tricksy, and yet it's a very moving poem. And